I wanna be the best in the game, invest in my name. Check no restraints, I'm obsessed with the pain. I ingest, I retain, assess and I change. Possessed by the thought I'll be free one day from society's restraints. Money, clout and fame, mud, disease, a plague. We all love to hate, have to play the game, have to make a name. All our insecurities are on display. This is war with the enemy, think that it was meant to be. Living in a time where disease is on every screen. I won't let them
Hello listeners, and welcome back to another episode of Tactical Awareness. I am joined by Owen and Dan for yet another one of our Season 1 episodes on Beginner, Infinity, and 4 topics. This time around, we're going to talk about the end of feeling like a beginner. What does it look like, feel like? What are some hallmarks that might mean that you are no longer actually a beginner? Doesn't mean you're a salty, experienced veteran with a million scars and 1,000 tales to tell about Infinity, but it does mean that you feel a little more like the tools to play the game are at hand, and you find yourself enjoying the games, win, lose, or draw. So we're going to go through and talk about 3 separate items that might mean that you are ready to be no longer a beginner. And if that's useful for you, then I hope you enjoy this episode. So let's dive in, and I'm joined now by Owen and Dan. Hey everybody, welcome to episode 6 of season 1 of Tactical Awareness, where we are winding down our little beginner series. Well, not winding it down, but winding down the beginning of the beginning, as they say. With episode 6, when are you done being a beginner? So before we jump too far ahead into that, we're going to do a little callback, catch up with everybody. Owen and Dan are here, hear about how their weeks went in the hobby, and do a little bit of housekeeping about episode 5. It was a good one. I like it when we bicker. Some people didn't like when we bicker, but it's very real. I cannot imagine almost any interaction with Owen and I where Owen doesn't say something inflammatory and I argue with him about something. And in the last episode, where we were doing our housekeeping about the topic of managing tilt and getting good at playing bad, we had a moment come up where Owen and I were talking about face-to-face rolls and whether or not a hacking program can be used face-to-face against shooting. And what was the answer, Owen?
I believe you can.
That is correct, sir. You definitely can.
100 points.
100 points to Gryffindor. Slytherin negative 5,000. So yeah. So there is actually
wait. Pause. If you're Gryffindor and Owen's Slytherin,
you're a
Hufflepuff. Hell am I?
You're a Hufflepuff.
I'll take it. I'll take it.
Definitely a Hufflepuff.
I'll take it.
100 million% a Hufflepuff. Actually, there was a great graphic shared in our rules discussion forum, a dice roll cheat sheet, and you can probably just Google this, actually just N4 dice roll cheat sheet, and it has a whole a bunch of example sort of a chart of when you compare shoot to shoot or dodge to dodge, when is it a face-to-face roll and when is it a normal roll, and I quite like that. And it was a good way of quickly looking through and knowing when it is. But basically the short story long is, if you're rolling dice and your opponent's rolling dice and they create a state or impact each other, then it's considered face-to-face. And no matter how weird sort of universe wise that feels, that's just the mechanic of the game. There was some other comments too about how people weren't super into the fact that we left the discussion open-ended with the I'm 99% sure I'm right. When you get into an argument, sometimes you just have to walk away. Sometimes there isn't going to be closure. And one of the things that I found, especially when I'm talking with my friends about rules, is when we actually sit down and finally read the rule and we both interpret it differently, that's the point at which you have to put it down and walk away. Owen wasn't going to get convinced in that moment, and I wasn't going to be convinced by Owen. And so putting it away and moving on is always the better thing. And then going to a third party for arbitration. In this case, we went to the third party of the internet and you guys, the listeners, to hear what the consensus is in the universe. And that feels like a healthier way to do it for me personally. So I think that's probably how we'll end up doing it, is we'll put a pin in it once we've actually read and analyzed the rule. We'll actually take the time to do that. And if it doesn't, if we can't still agree, then you got to go to a third party and
And I
ask.
can't read,
us.
so
And that's right. No one's never read a rule in his life. He's
it's all intuition. You
it's all
just
intuition.
play what you think is how it should be.
Schrodinger's brain. It's
Learning
both
from
alive
Owen
and dead at the same time.
Learning from Owen and from N3 to N4, and he's like, "This is how things work." I'm like, "Okay, yeah," and I'm like, "Wait a minute, that's not how things work."
Half of it is lies and half is the truth. I can't even imagine how confusing that was for you, Dan. I'm so glad
still
you're
is
at least
confusing. We're
one of
still
you's
getting
literate.
into stuff. We're still getting into stuff.
Give me an example. Give me an example of what's happening.
Great. What was the last one? Dang it! Now I can't remember anything. Now all of my claims are invalid. It'll come to me.
Okay, just interrupt me later on in the episode.
I mean, the last thing that we were talking about was the interaction with, and I mean, this is on you as much as it's on me, but it's the different types of immobilizing sources and the outcomes caused by them. So
With
like the fact that certain ones are whip and certain ones are fizz, and like, yeah, I probably knew that, but you never encountered the number of guys doing immobilization in N3 as you do against O12 in N4.
Wow.
Where it goes from like, yeah, nobody's got that. Like there's like 4 weapons that do it, and like one what's it called? Profile, like gun that does it. And now it's like everyone hacks all the time, and this entire faction, every other model has one.
Yeah,
so.
you might trip over an acrolite cannon every now and again, but Dan's playing the faction where everyone's got a sticky shotgun, and then the rest of them are armed with EM weapons. So you're just like you're just shitting immobilization everywhere.
Yeah, it's the isolation having a -9 to reset.
Yeah,
like, yeah, with no idea. And so it's like, oh yeah, it's not a guarantee once you get free arrows to try to reset as people running around you when you're stuck.
My last game against Jordan, Dart YOLO'd an EM grenade at my Gator, who was double template chain rifling her on the way by. She revealed and just like YOLO'd a grenade and took the 2 chain rifles, didn't die, which infuriated me, and managed to immobilize, isolate my Gator. And then he walked over and possessed it. I was so angry, and I was out of command tokens. There was nothing I could do. My own Gator just turned around on my army and just started obliterating all my own guys. Just walked over to Senior Massacre and was like, well, hello, tiny man. Like it was absolutely oppressive. So I immediately went home and finished painting my dart, which felt like the right thing to do.
It checks out.
Yeah, it checks out. It seems legit. So yes, yeah, that is your faction, I guess, must uptick the need to get those rules right and clear and know the difference between the A and B, which is the physical or the EM/hacking one.
Well, I played a game of Tabletop Simulator with my friend in Japan, which was great. But yeah, he had like a 5-man team that all ran around the corner at the same time, which he has learned not to do now. And then the EM grenade or EM mine went off, and they tried to kill Hippolyta instead of dodging, and Hippolyta threw a grenade, smoke eclipse grenade, and rolled like a 17 and like or a 16, whatever. It was super high. Dodged all the shots, and they all got isolated, immobilized, and it was like, wait, let's look at the rules. Wait, it's a -12 because they stack.
Yeah.
Oh no, you're done. And then Hippolyta was like, hello, chop 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 chop, and they all disappeared.
You're decidedly screwed. And just walked over and just started stabbing the Terracotta Warriors. It's the Bioshock thing where you freeze guys and then walk over and hit them with a drill. Exactly. So yeah, that's a really good story actually for you to bring up later. I have a prompt in here, Dan, that I think is very apt to what you just talked about.
Very well.
So the last one was, because our last episode was about events, and going to your first event. There was a lot of discussion actually in especially our Discord, but about people who felt like they were intimidated by the idea of going to an event. Like their player level might get them like judged, and that Infinity felt a little bit unreachable. Obviously, the 3 of us are going to struggle a little bit with that because the 3 of us have been going to events for other games for a good portion of our lives at this point. So not knowing anything isn't really a barrier to us going to an event, I don't think, the 3 of us, but it definitely came up as like a common theme. Did you guys have any thoughts on that?
I think it's all in your head when you're like, oh no, I need to know more to play in a tournament. It's like people think of it as like showing up to a track and field event of not training at all, and just like everyone finishes, and then like you're the lone person running by themselves, and everyone laughs at you, and like you're super embarrassed. It's not like that at all.
Right.
It's you're just playing individual games. Everyone's focused on their own game. They're focused on the guys that are really trying to win are up front, and the guys that are more casual are not even looking at the scoreboard, you know, who's winning or losing. And if you do get last place, it's not like a, huh, thank goodness I'm not last. Like nobody really, it just doesn't exist. There's not the comparison there. And when you're going to your first tournament, you're going to learn anyways. And so I think a lot of people just overestimate the amount of embarrassment that exists when you're coming in last, because there's really none.
Yeah. I think it's that expectations thing, right? If you expect to go to a tournament and win it your first time out, you know, like the wizard playing Super Mario 3, like it's not necessarily not everybody's gonna do that. And I think it's pretty unreasonable to go to your first event and do more than just experience what it's like going to an event. Owen shared a really cool story during that episode too about the idea that when you go to those events, you feel like you're going to be the one who knows the least, and then you're surrounded by people of like all different experience levels.
Yeah, it's very much like it's never clear. Like, depending on how much you play in advance, it might end up that you are the more experienced person at the tournament. Like what your first tournament is, like, because they don't happen all the time, and they're starting to happen more again. But like, you sit there and you play 30 or 40 games with friends of yours, and you play like a wide variety of little things to really try and nail down the rules. Or maybe you go on Tabletop Simulator and you're playing with a few people online, and you go to the tournament and you're playing a bunch of people who are like, yeah, I haven't played in 6 months, and I only play once every month, and blah blah blah. And next thing you know, that like, oh, you're the person. It's like, oh no, that's how that works, or this is how it works, or oh, is that how you guys play it? Because when we play, it's like this, and it turns out you're actually the correct one. Like, you never know.
It's funny how experience sneaks up on you. Like if you just have a weekly Infinity game and you play for like, you know, 6 months, you've played 26 games of Infinity, right? Before an event. That's a pretty significant amount of games. Like if you play 52 games a year, you're pretty experienced. Even and just because you go to a place where there's stakes, right? Where there's like a ranking of like who did well and who didn't do well, that doesn't mean you don't have experience. I think that's what you're getting out of an event. I think the big thrust of the last episode was you're getting the opportunity to have new experiences. And that's what's really valuable. Getting to stretch skills that aren't just knowing the rules. And I'm going to get to that actually as a kind of key feature of this episode in a minute. But that kind of takes us through all of like the housekeeping and the stuff from last episode. I will go through my week and then you guys can share yours. So I boxed up 10 tables of terrain because I had to shut down registration for Tactical Awareness's Winter War because we overbooked. We got to like 24, which is great. And that means that I'm having some of the guys bring down some extra tables just to make sure we have enough terrain. But I've got it all boxed up. I got all tabletoppers made. My washing machine in the basement right now has a bunch of tablecloths in it. I ordered some cool kind of like table cards so we can have our tables all numbered. And so I got all the prize support. Actually, Mark's dice roll trays and stuff are all done. And Mike from Protect Studios shared Timbot A, which I'm super excited about. He digitally 3D sculpted an HVT/Sectet model of a robotic Tim Hortons mascot from the future, who is one of the coolest Infinity miniatures or, you know, independently made Infinity assets I think I've ever seen. And he will be the tournament mascot. Mike's planning on doing a different Timbot, like Timbot B and Timbot C, for the various events as we go through the year. So Timbot will be the 2023 Tactical Awareness tournament, like fun buck thing that you get. And the idea is it's a miniature you can use as an HVT or like one of the different ITS assets. So you could use it to bash your bazooka. He'll do one with like a SMG or a combi rifle. You could use it as your turret. You could use it as your security attachment, your CSU or whatever too. And it's just the franchises never stop, even in the human sphere. You got to keep selling those Tim Hortons franchises and having cheap and effective coffee across the universe. I built a new container city. Bandua was kind enough to set one of their pre-painted ready for battle tables. It's the one from Interplanetario 2018. They made a bundle, and it's kind of like the container city from what was that movie or that video game? There's a video game called Brink, old Xbox game where you played like a big parkour kind of like first person shooter on a big like floating container city. It's sort of like that. So I built and played a game with Jordan on that. It was super fun. The containers are really big. It's a very different table from the standard like sort of Rampart. Like everything's got like a ledge sort of tables. There's no ledges on anything, so it kind of stretches your brain and makes you have to play differently. And I painted Andromeda, and I painted up Dart for my Aleph to play some games of Chase tomorrow. So I'm pretty pumped for that too. What about you guys?
Dan and I played 2 games, I think.
Yeah.
Dan has won both of those games as I've been trying to play Ariadne. And
now the student has become the master.
Yep.
I'm just better at rolling armor saves.
Yeah, it's wild. Like normally, and I've even brought it up in this podcast already. My indifference to like, oh, it's just dice. But like I actually think it's based on the scenarios that we've played. Like that was the last thing I had looked at there. But yeah, it's been a weird, like, he has a model, it's armor 4 or 5 in cover, so it's not nothing. But I'll get 9 to 13 to 17 consecutive hits on him, and he just makes them all. And like normally that's an exaggeration when you do that many, but like in the last game we played, he had, was it a razor? What was it in the middle?
Raptor.
It was a raptor. So just Uxia hit him 9 times, and he just didn't die. He just killed her and then killed the guys nearby and then walked away.
I took 1 wound.
Yep. He did take a wound. But yeah, that's just.
This doesn't sound like dice. This sounds like karmic justice. This sounds like you've been kicking too many puppies, and Dan is the fist of karma or something like that. What terrible thing have you done this week, Owen? Who did you piss off? Who did you hurt? Tell me who you hurt.
Maybe that's what it is, but but yeah, it's pretty excessive, and in a sense that like it normally, and I think really what it is and what I'll need to change is we'll play some scenarios that are less built around killing each other. That like, all right, I can go push buttons if things go wrong, because at first it was like, oh, clearly the problem is like I'm focused too much on trying to fight. Like you don't have to kill the enemy to win the scenario, so let's just play the scenario more. But it's just like, nope. Nope, nothing's mattering.
Nothing, and nothing I did worked, and then nothing I did worked again, and then nothing I did worked again.
Yep. And that's kind of been the couple games that we've played.
You painted some stuff too.
I had a lot of button pushers in that list. Okay, I was ready to push buttons.
Would that you did? Then you wouldn't instantly kill all of my guys, and I couldn't kill you.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I posted a picture in the Discord for those of you that are wondering, with a scout who had an entire lineup of guys. That scout died killing 2 of them. There were 4 models that he could hit with his shotguns as well as his mines, and he's just like, I make my saves. Armor 1 against a boarding shotgun. That's fine.
It's fine. Just walk it off.
A mine. You get over those.
Let me guess. You active turn dodged and placed a mine at the same time.
Active turn dodge, yes. The mine was an ARO against another model who had a riot stopper. Because I was like, if I fail the dodge, there's still a mine. And then I got out of the riot stopper's goo, but it didn't matter. Just didn't matter.
Just nothing mattered.
Yep. It was just a rough kind of game.
Solid. And you painted your USARF, right? That was like last week too. Yeah. So you painted some US Ariadne, which is cool. They're a fun list. How did you what did you get started with? You found the old starter?
Yeah, I found the old starter, and then I just had like models floating around that kind of bumped it up, and then I proxied a little bit. Like I used Vet Kazakh as the unknown ranger, and that solves a ton of your points issues.
He's so good. Did you take the AP Spitfire one?
Didn't matter what I brought. He died to a TR bot when the TR bot was in the open at short range. Yeah.
Okay, it's gonna be one of those stories.
Yeah, it was like
TR.
the unknown ranger in a link team walks around the corner against a gangbuster. Gangbuster shoots at -3 one shot. What's it called? Submachine gun. Wounds the unknown ranger, putting him on no wound in cap, who misses all of his shots. And I'm like, okay, well, that sucks, but I have to go stop that HMG. So I pass by him, I get within 8 of the HMG, and I then spend 7 orders shooting an HMG at point blank, winning every like face-to-face roll before he finally takes a single wound. And then I go back and fight the gangbuster, and he kills the other guy in the link because I'm running out of orders at that point, which of course was my doctor.
Wow. Well, that sounds oppressive.
You killed the HMG. You killed it.
I downed it.
Oh, that's true. And I brought
and
it
then
back
you brought
up.
it right back up as your first order. Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah, it was pretty rough.
With a Monstrucker nonetheless.
Yeah.
Listening to like, I know I'm like 3,000 kilometers away, but listening to Owen's like simmering rage from his games this week is making me really happy. I can toast a marshmallow from here with the low grade fury coming off him about these last 2 games.
It's fine.
I
mean, and it's the same thing. Like, I've had my fair share of beating Dan with like a lucky turn of the dice.
Yeah, it's true.
So like, I'll wait.
That's infinity, man. That's what I was gonna say. That's just infinity. You just gotta sit it out. You just gotta sit it until the dice come back, or whatever. You need to like sweetgrass or sage your house, man, and get the bad hoodoo out of there for whatever it is that you've done.
Go back to Hawk Islam. That's the problem.
That's the problem. You didn't have enough Magariba guard in that army. That was the problem.
Exactly. I haven't actually played Dan with double Maggie yet.
I almost made Jordan cry telling him about that Magariba guard list. I was explaining this week about just like the various like lists that you've taken over the last 3 weeks. He's like, well, what's he playing now? And I was like, well, kind of, what is he playing? Every week he's playing something different, because I think he's just playing how can I melt the brains of anyone across from me right now just to see how they react. I was like, what do you mean? I was like, well, I think his first week he just decided he was going to lay 20 mines across the middle of the table and see if somebody had a stroke. I just about made him shit his pants. He was laughing so hard. He's like, what are you talking about? He's like, well, I took double Maggie with extra attack aware orders that could reload themselves, and then just sprayed mines in every direction. Yeah, so Jordan's getting bad ideas from you at a distance. I'll probably have to deal with that at some point. What about you, Dan?
Yeah, the 2 games, lots more painting. I'm getting like I'm closing in on maybe like another like 10 models, and I'll have most of the O12 faction painted up, except for a bunch of the different little characters around. And then I've been printing off more and more tokens just to have something that's obvious to me of everything, mainly some 3D like camo tokens with like little silhouettes and just stuff, because like half the time I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot those guys were there.
Right.
It's just like I just don't have the mind for it yet, because it's like, let's make things some big and obvious things for me. And then obviously with all the isolation that's happening with all the EM mines and weapons and everything, just having tokens and painting them up, and just custom ones, free ones I'm finding online and resin printing them.
The smiley face one's really nice. The yellow ones, I think you post them in the Discord. They're like a guy, but with like a smiley face at his feet. Those are really cool for the impersonation markers.
And there's a little 2 in the middle, so you know it's impersonation.
Cool. I would have just like color coded them. I would have had like a green and a red or something like that, probably, to tell me which one was which, if they were good or they were bad. Well, that works too. Numbers are good. Numbers are also symbols.
I mean, I think these files were made in the last edition where it was 1 and 2 instead of A and B.
Got it. That would make sense.
And I'm too lazy to change it or edit the file.
Well, they're gonna do what you need, which is let you identify what you're looking at. Sweet.
But yeah, otherwise, same shenanigans with Owen. From my perspective, the first game, yes, it was insane dice where it was like, how am I still alive? Nobody knows. But hey, we'll go with it. And then in the second game, it was a little of that, but not crazy amounts. But it
ended up being like a lynch
game. But adding on with the other game, back to back,
right,
probably felt like a lot for Owen.
I'm sure.
Guy.
Yeah, poor little guy. Poor little guy. No one ever thinks about Owen.
I think it was much more that it was in the second game. In the first game, it was kind of all over the place where just nothing worked.
Right.
The second game, it was just in like a very specific, like if this changes, the game is easily won. If this doesn't change, then the game is probably lost.
It was decisive moments.
Yeah. Whereas the first one was just like, did I kill any models this game? Because I don't have any left.
It's true. That raptor that was
I'm in
up
retreat
in the middle of nowhere. He was by spec ops, so if he died, he was granting 2 victory points to the other side. And I was like, why is he up here? I don't know. And then he was like, I'll throw a bajillion dice at him. I'm like, I'll make all my armor saves, no worries.
It'll be fine.
And then it was all good.
And then you did, and then it was fine.
And then I won like 4-0, and then the first game I can't remember, but it was. I'm definitely learning a lot more of like, if I don't take this type of model, then complications arise. When it's like there's a sniper looking down a pathway, and I'm like, how do I attack that sniper?
Right.
Sure, they only get 1 die against me, but they get a +3 and I get a -3. So that's really risky.
That's an interesting observation that you've gotten to that point now where like you can kind of feel that that decision-making power kind of get into your hands where you feel like you know what you want to do and what you should be doing.
It's like, what risks are, important enough, or what, when you, with your list building, you paint yourself into a corner sometimes, you have to take bigger risks. But then if they play into it, you're at advantage, but if they don't, then you got to figure it out still, and just kind of learning and kind of stretching your models and seeing what they can do and what they can't do, and then going back and be like, okay, so I'm going to build another list, and now I'm gonna take out that one person because they weren't doing that for me, and bring in this person because they can kind of do that, but they'll also answer that question. If that comes up, and it doesn't necessarily come up, but if it does, to have more bases covered kind of thing. So I suspect slowly it'll be like I'll have very preferred models, but at the same time, there's so much variance with the vanilla factions and even with O12 that I'm like, I think I'm just going to keep on bringing like crazy different lists until forever. It's just because it's just fun to mix it up.
Definitely. No, I definitely agree with that. I think it's fun to start to get that feeling though, like you know how to make a good decision. And that actually, I think, takes us. Look at that segue. Look how well you softball that up to me. And we'll actually push ahead to the theme of this episode, which is Tactical Awareness Season 1, Episode 6. When are you done with being a beginner? So this was kind of a logical next topic, I think. This was the thing that when we were talking about how to round out this like concepts phase of the podcast, it got me thinking about like you don't really there's no like rite of passage in Infinity. Like there's no like congratulations, hey, now you're not a beginner anymore. And so this seemed like a really good sort of like end cap to all the concepts we talked about. And I will give a callback warning. We're going to refer to some roles and fire team and mission concepts during this episode that came from Season 1 in episodes 1 to 4. So if you find any of the things we say confusing, check out those episodes before you go any further. All right, so this is a tricky one because mechanically there's not a lot of difference between a beginner and a veteran player. Even if you've studied the rules top to bottom and you know exactly how every single rule in the book works and relates to one another, that doesn't mean you're great at winning the game. And I'm going to say that again for the people in the back. Knowing the rules doesn't mean you're going to win your games. Making good decisions and balancing what you know with what is going on is what helps you win games. And that takes experience. It's one of the reasons why in the last episode, we encourage new players to go out and play in Infinity events. Not because they'll win, but because they'll learn to be presented with new opponents, play styles, and conundrums to try to unravel. And that'll go further than anything else to making your confidence of playing the game go up. It isn't how many games you win, it's how many games you play. And that feeling of being not a beginner anymore, it'll just creep up on you. So what I've got here in this episode is 3 sections. And I think these sections are kind of universal. And they might be that rite of passage that you look back at your experience playing the game if you are a veteran Infinity player, or you can look forward to if you're a new Infinity player and go, oh, this is the point at which I stopped being like brand new to the game. So I'm gonna jump in with the first one. Do you have anything to add to that intro? Do you think there's anything to say more about that idea that there's a difference between knowing the rules and playing the game?
Just the thought that all because you're not a new player doesn't mean you shouldn't be coming in with like a new mindset of like there's always stuff to learn and there's always things to do.
Definitely.
To improve. You're never like Infinity is way too complicated to solve, quote unquote. And so yeah, like that never changes.
Yeah, keeping an open mind is I think important in any board game. And I think we saw through the first 6 episodes of this podcast, I think the three of us kind of transform a little bit. Owen's definitely gotten up to speed on the N4 stuff, whether he likes it or not. Right. And Dan, you can speak confidently about stuff that you were literally like pumping our brakes and making us slow down and have to like repeat or explain in the first episode. Right. So I think this is really the reason this is a great end cap to this first arc of the season is because the two of you are the actual examples of what this stuff looks like. And that's kind of how I wanted to approach this episode. So the first one I don't think actually applies to any of the three of us, although it has at times, but it's not necessarily our barrier to feeling new. And I think one of the sort of rites of passage is you start managing your tilt. You start managing how emotionally invested you get in either not feeling you're knowing what you're doing or not knowing what to do in a given situation. So one way you're going to get there is when your frustration level starts to go down. When you start making decisions that you feel like you own the result of, you stop caring about the dice or your opponent's luck as much. Actually, as Owen described earlier, letting go of the things you can't control and examining what you can actually affect in a game happens over time. And like lots of things, it's easy to tell yourself you played well when you win and easy to blame your opponent's luck when you lose. Objectivity takes time, and our advice last episode was all designed to help encourage this feeling of control that gets you to the place where you're enjoying the game, whether you win or you lose. So do you guys have any examples of that and how that feels like that rite of passage, like where you maybe frustrated in a situation before and you used it? I think if I was to call back to the previous episodes on what I heard you describe was that active turn dodging stuff and how you started using it in your games. Do you have any like examples like of a recent game where you've like effectively used it or incorporated it?
Not to any way that would be like what I had done at the like that had been done in that tournament against me, I guess is the way I would describe it.
Right.
Simply because the opportunities haven't arisen. Like I haven't taken the effort to try and really like dig into it. Yeah. One, because of model collection, like there's some things that I don't have that I'd like to have before I go that route. And then the other one, just games, just number of games played. But yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm thinking of tilt right now.
It's
like
about
my
that
reaction to it.
Yeah, or just like where something that frustrated you became something that was like a complex part of the game. You know what I mean? Like that whole like that whole transition. It doesn't even have to be you, maybe. It could just be something you've observed or someone you've played against in the past where you watch them lose objectivity and they've gained objectivity over time. Like we've all got tons of opponents. And I don't like to like name names, but I know I personally have some opponents where just the repetition of playing more games has almost like beaten out of them that frustration with like their dice or the dice results or even the choices they make where they just kind of go, okay, like, yep, that definitely didn't work this time, but it definitely could have worked. I definitely had the chance of working. And I'm objectively looking at the fact that I got unlucky here. And it's not me saying, ooh, I got unlucky because I tried to roll a, 4 or less and I didn't. And I'm mad that my 20% chance didn't go off. It's more like I tried 75% chance of having something go off and it really should have. And your opponent's commiserating with you and going, yep, it definitely should have. And that definitely was unlucky. And you're not getting like emotionally sort of charged over it and losing perspective. I've watched that happen with people.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, it comes with just playing more. Like you play lots of games and you end up in a situation where like when you've played one game, 100% of your experience of infinity is in that game. And so every
Right.
good thing and every bad thing is the first and only time that that good and bad happened. And then by the second one, half of the good and bad things happened in that game. And then a third, and then a quarter. And like by the time you've played 40, 50, 80 games, like I don't remember the bad or good from 6 or 7 or 8 or 10 games back.
Yeah.
It's all just gone, and you know that the next game it's going to be the same thing. Like you're going to play, and they'll like right now the games with Dan are recent, and it's like, okay, these specific things were issues, and we'll try and find a way to overcome that. Maybe we'll lean into hacking a little bit more so that I can kind of do that while I try and shoot at him, or I won't active turn him, and I'll try and build more reactively. Because then like you never get tilted if you kill someone in an ARO. That's just how it is. Like you can get mad if you spend a lot of orders and then finally kill someone, but if you kill someone when they're spending orders, you never get tilted from that. So
Yeah, definitely.
but those are in my mind now, and I know that in 6 weeks they'll be gone. So it'll be whatever the new thing is that's frustrated me, whether it's dodge rolling or whatever. So that's kind of my perspective on it.
And it just kind of fades over time. It feels like it's funny because it's one of the hardest ones I think probably to like quantify for people is realizing they're not as emotionally charged, or like they're more relaxed during their games, or they show up to a game night and they're more sort of like I don't know, just like they enjoy it more. I think it's one that sneaks up on you. So I think it's worth talking about because it's a little less sort of like you can't script it or plan for it. It is that thing that comes from experience and repetition, but you realize when you look back that at some point it happened and you're no longer sort of like killing yourself over like the results of your games or like the luck you had in your games, the decisions you made. You're able to like enjoy analyzing it, enjoy looking at it. And I mean, to your sort of like speaking of like that repetition thing, creating that in people. I'm looking at YouTube right now, and our last upload for this was April 24th, 2020, which is the last N3 game we ever played. And we played 128 games of Infinity that we recorded, not the ones that we played in tournaments or events or off camera or on your channel or whatever. But we played 128 games of N3 just on that one playlist. And I know there's other playlists actually too from N3 that we probably aren't counting here, but there's probably close to 200 recorded games that you played over the course of those. I went to 2020, so 4 years, 2016 probably it started, 2015.
Right.
Like that's a long time, man. That's a lot of games. That's a lot of repetition. I think that's a key feature in like that not feeling new. And even in that result that you got when you went to Adepticon for the first time and you realized, oh wait, I know a lot more than some of the people that are here. And it's just because I've played a whole lot of games of this game.
Yeah, that Adepticon experience was an interesting one, that first time going. As far as like when are you not a new player kind of feeling.
Tell me about it.
Oh, it was just the amount of buildup. Like I sunk a lot of effort and time into trying to make sure that I was of the caliber that I thought that I was going to need to be able to participate at a tournament at a convention, only to learn that it was like, oh, you've never played against Hak Islam ever.
This is N3s. These are like N3 Gazis. The N3 Gazis were that was a lot for people.
Yeah, let me tell you about how. Let me show you what these guys do. Yeah, so like that kind of thing, and then the learning experience of that, of like how to feel about events when you go into them, because you like it. I don't know how to phrase this in a way that's effective to what I'm trying to say. Basically, trying to say that I don't know where I'm at. I'm trying to like phrase the idea of you can over prepare for an event and then find out that like it wasn't like you didn't need to do that. Like you could go have a good time and you didn't have to spend a ton of time and be nervous about it and trying to really like reach that
Like
stage.
you overbuilt it in your head almost, like it was
Yeah, like
overbuilt
that's
up. Yeah.
and then the nervousness of like making mistakes and like how fast, like if you make a mistake in a game and it starts like you can feel yourself starting to tilt, and then you realize that like, oh, none of this matters. Like, who cares? Like, here comes the guy pushing the cart with all the beers on it. Like, it doesn't matter.
I can take a breath. You have to like take a
Yeah.
lap and take a breath and be like, oh, hang on, actually the stakes are not as high as I built them up to be in my head.
Right.
That's probably that moment for you. You know what I mean? Like that was probably going to that one Adepticon, because I remember your stories about it afterwards and being like, you feel like you were coming out of a fishbowl into a shark tank, but actually it was a bunch of fish bowls all dumped together as opposed to being like a shark tank. Because it wasn't the specter basically that had been built up in your head while you're getting ready for it.
Yeah, exactly.
What about you, Dan? Do you have anything like that? Did you so you're sort of like our and it doesn't have to, maybe tilt is the wrong word in this case for you, but is there a moment where you started to feel like more confident, like you were making better decisions?
I don't know. I feel like it kind of like sneaks up on you. Again, I'm only like, I guess I've played a bunch of games now, but I'm probably under 15.
Sure, but 15
that's
that's a game.
Yeah,
I was gonna say that's a game a week for 15 weeks. Like that's 3 months.
I played 3 games this week.
Yeah,
so 2 in person and 1 on tabletop.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's just kind of you start to realize how the game works more. Of like, okay, I made a mistake there, and so I deserve to kind of lose these models, and it's a bonus if I don't. Without it's kind of like, okay, I left myself open to that. I could have set up my second turn deployment better, or I didn't take that one model that I probably would need against that whatever thing. The main thing for like experience play is just these two games against Owen that I played was, I mean, obviously in the moment, super frustration about the rolls, but then after the game, he's like, well, after that first game, I thought I'd just bring better guns, and then you couldn't make your armor saves because I'd have way bigger guns. But then it happened again. So now I'm thinking, can I bring even bigger guns? Like, what can I do? And it wasn't about like, you lucky son of a bitch, I'll get you next time. It was like, okay, what did I learn from this? How can I build my list different to, even if you are lucky, it won't matter because I'll have built a better list and I'll have played better.
Yeah, you re-rack. Yeah.
And so Owen's approach to it of like, I'm like, well, I mean, I had some lucky rolls. It's okay to just say it was off game. And he's like, that's not really how I approach this game. And I thought that was really cool. And it was just kind of, yeah, there's always stuff in your control that you can do better. And so just focus on that and build on that. And I was actually thinking, I forgot to mention it on the Tilt episode, but I heard, this is like way before we'd ever met. This is years and years and years ago. But I was just like, Owen was like, hey, Ash this. I'm like, who's this schmuck? Let's just check him out. So I pulled up one of your videos and I don't remember what you were rolling, but you're like, you just rolled god awful. And you're like, well, okay. And then obviously there's like editing in there and you could turn off the camera and scream or whatever. But it was just like the matter of fact of, oh, I rolled bad. Okay, moving on. And it was just kind of like, I'm like, I need more of that in my games. I need to emulate that more because that is all you can do. In matter of fact. And so it was just kind of that, just take it on the chin, do what you can.
It's almost become a meme how bad my dice rolls are sometimes though, so I just lean into it now. I'll be honest, man. You just gotta take the prevailing winds and sail sometimes, right? Owen can attest to the fact that I don't tend to movie magic things. We've both seen some folks who make content who will Hollywood movie magic certain moments. I actually think the messiness is part of the charm. I think blowouts in games are kind of important sometimes. A lot of times people will post like, why would you post this blowout of it? Or people will comment like, why would you post this blowout of a game? And it's like, because they happen. Because people go to watch these games a lot of the time to see what's possible, and a blowout's always possible. And to see someone react to a blowout and be like, oh, well, that happened, here's why it happened. It's actually just as useful as watching like a tight, close game. And I mean, some people don't want to watch that, but I don't think there's anything wrong with it because I think it's just reality. I think it's authentic. So I tend to roll with my bloods. I just kind of go, all right, no, today Today was
Okay.
not my day. Today the bear ate me, as they say.
So-
Sometimes you eat the bear, and sometimes the bear eats you.
Yum yum. Damn Ariadne. So there's shout out to a local content creator in Edmonton, Mr. Malorian, because he turned over the War Machine and we played War Machine a lot together in different tournaments. And he always records all the games, kind of thing, takes pictures of it, and just kind of does a voiceover. It's pretty simplified, but he's a lot of good content. But anyways, he he played a game against me and he moved up, and I'm like, oh, well, I'm gonna shoot your Colossus with a gun that can see through everybody now, and then all of a sudden your Warcaster is available. And in that game, if your leader dies, it's just all over. And so then I just walked up and shot him to death, and it was over. And it wasn't really even a game.
It was like 3 minutes, and he black pennied your Colossal.
Shadowfire, I think. Anyways,
Yeah.
At any rate, he's like, oh, I'm not even gonna bother posting this. I'm like, no, post it, but then just post like 20 minutes of black footage of nothing afterwards.
Right.
So no one will ever be able to know when they come into it how short the game was.
Oh, just me humming Danny Boy.
But
Like,
he ended up putting on some clown music or something, and it was really funny.
and the
But,
Benny Hill music.
But it's just kind of when you embrace the suck and just kind of go. I don't know if I'd call myself an experienced Infinity player, but I'm getting there. Like, there's still lots of factions I haven't played against. There's still lots of models I've never experienced. And so when I go up against that, I fully expect to lose to them, and then know what they can do, and then kind of be able to react afterwards.
And I think that's an important distinction, though, Dan. We're not saying experienced. We're saying just no longer a beginner. Like, when are you done feeling like a beginner at the game? Because I don't think you ever really feel like super experienced. What I like about this game is it's always somewhat in motion, right? They're adding new profiles, they're tweaking profiles and stuff. And because it's all digitally sourced and we all play off the app, we just kind of get these like live updates, but it doesn't really change that much because the game's not so list dependent. It doesn't feel like we're always we're always having to like relearn the game. It just feels like it's just enough that I don't think I ever I don't like the word experience. Maybe it's not experienced. Maybe it's like you can be like a seasoned Infinity player versus being like a veteran or a season or an experience or something like that, because I think the experiences are important, but this is definitely not about being like a veteran player. This is more about being just not feeling lost and like you're at the beginning of that journey.
Yeah, I find that more and more with Infinity, which I really like, is that so I watched like this tier list of like factions, and like they're like, okay, we're doing this, but in reality, tier lists in Infinity don't really work.
That's a shout out to Lost Lieutenant, I think. And
probably I can't remember what it was.
It's probably
so
Lost Lieutenant. Yeah, it's probably
it was right after
Rob Cantrell and Lost Lieutenant did a tier list, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, it was right after the updates to the new like fire teams.
Yeah, that would have been that.
Whatever. So anyways, but it was just, I thought it was really cool that they're like, yeah, this doesn't really work, but we're doing it because lots of people want us to do it. And then it was just kind of like, even at the end of it, and they're like, and so besides these like bottom 4 or 5 factions that are just have no tools and they're just really struggling, if you're an experienced player and won with any of these in a tournament, no surprise. Like any of them could do well.
Yeah, anything.
And I was like, oh, cool. So that's great. And so it's kind of like one of those things where you don't sometimes you feel in other, like I played orcs in 40k and the edition changes and rules change, and you're like, how the hell am I supposed to win with this faction anymore? Like it's such a struggle and it feels so bad. And I feel like because there's a lot more crossover in the factions, I guess they're not as unique, but it makes it so that you don't have to collect a whole new army to feel good about winning games when a new edition or new rules come out.
Yeah,
you can just adjust your play a little bit.
Yeah, the core skills and equipment of the game does really mean that like a rising tide lifts all ships in Infinity, right? Like a change to a multi-sniper rifle affects every faction in the game almost. And so it's not like you're left behind when something like tweaks basically from the core mechanics. Yeah, I think it's a really useful observation. And I think that honestly, that's I put this one first because it's the most touchy-feely. When are you done being a beginner? And it's also the most like internalized one. This is the one that no one can tell you. This is the one you have to feel for yourself. And it's the one that comes through just playing a lot of games.
I think to piggyback on it too, Dan, is that you are you've encountered like one of the things is I'm also the kind of person who will just like play everything. So like when we play games, I've played the same faction once, I think, out of the
Yeah.
like 8 games that we've played. And so you end up in a situation where you're encountering all of the weird stuff right away. Like I think the 3 big ones that you haven't encountered yet that are things that I experience and or are common to experience in Infinity are the Swiss Guard and his versions, like other factions that have it, which is basically a heavily armored -6 to hit guy with a long range weapon, and one of the TO tags. And like after that, you'll have played against smiley faces, camo spam, assault tags, heavy infantry, little infantry, like jammers, hackers, all of that kind of stuff.
Freaking jammers, man.
It used to be so much worse. They used to not be limited in shots. They used to just sit there forever isolating guys. It was oppressive.
Owen always does that. He's like, look how awful this guy is. He used to be worse.
He used to, so that one profile that Owen takes, the Mutawagazis, they used to be one profile. So all the equipment that came on those guys used to be on one guy. They had everything. They had the chain rifles, they had Emirats, they had jammers, they had smoke grenades. Like now they split that into like 4 profiles. These guys were literally carrying, they were a 5-point guy carrying like 40 points of just gear. It was so stupid.
The Emirat leaving a lot of the profiles is a big sad, especially with how much better they are now.
Well, that's why too. EM is so good. EM is the EM close combat open and EM grenade is, and EM mine is so good. That's why the Raven Eye is so amazing, right? He's just loaded with EM.
Yeah, I forgot he had an Emirat, so he just has a large template.
Yeah, he has an EM chain
ARO.
rifle, an EM chain rifle, and mine layer and EM mines. It's so dumb for 12 points. He's so good.
Yep.
My Timbot might be becoming a Raven Eye officer. That's the Raven Eye officers are all just Tim Hortons mascots on my spaceship.
It's my extra kappas. That's
right. All the extra kappas. Just give them little hats. All right, so let's get on to part 2 then. So part 2, another way that you can feel like you're not a beginner anymore. This one's a bit touchy-feely too, but it's joining a community. Nothing's better at giving you a point of reference for how you're doing than talking about it with other people and seeing other people play. The simple encouragement of not going through things or thinking that things you struggle with are somehow unique goes a long way to making you feel like you know what you're doing. Even better, as you get comfortable with opponents and find people you enjoy playing with. As you've said before, this game is where the social contract is incredibly important. So practicing communication before, during, and after games is another one of those things that will help you no longer feel new. So this is another, I think, one that it's funny. I haven't done it in a long time. I'm kind of bringing it to me with the Winter War event, but being part of Infinity community and seeing and hearing other people talk about the things they struggle with in the game, even on Discord, even part of like this community that we have online, I think can make you feel like you're not by yourself, or that the things you don't understand or struggle with are somehow just unique to you. And that can push down that feeling of not being, of not knowing what you're doing, of being new. Have you guys had any experience with that?
No.
Owen doesn't like people.
Well, I should have anticipated this. So Dan, how does it feel? How does it feel playing with the folks in the Calgary meta?
Yeah, like I'm pretty social, and so like whenever I start a new game, I'm like, let's find all the people who also play this game, and I have no problem reaching out or asking questions or whatever, or like trying to get involved. I'm like, let me get into this group. Let me be whatever I need to be, so I'm starting to be part of this conversation, so I can learn from them. And it's just having you two guys is just like super awesome for Infinity, because I'm like, hey, how the heck does this work? Hey, how does this work? I'm just like half of our like chat before like podcasts and stuff is not about the podcast. It's like, hey, how does this rule work?
Yeah.
How does this rule work?
Yeah.
Wait, if I do this and this and this, and when this happens and when this happens, does this happen? Yes,
true.
no, what's happening? And then sometimes you're like, oh, I guess that doesn't work that way. Or sometimes it's like, no, Dan, you're an idiot. You forgot to read this whole page of rules. I'm like, oh, you're right. I should probably read the rule book once.
The answer is hidden here in the rule book.
Yeah. So it's huge for me is you becoming a part of the community, whether it's online or not, of just being able to ask questions, play different things, talk about things. It tears down so many barriers to learning the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and to like not participating. I feel like one of the problems with being new is you feel like a lot of the listeners said this with events, that idea that like they weren't good enough or they didn't know the rules well enough to go and play 3 games in a day. And it's like, probably not. If you can move, shoot, dodge, you can get through 3 games in a day. You might not win them all, you might make bad decisions, but you can definitely get through 3 games in a day. If you just know how those 3 rules work, you can play a game of Infinity, right? Like the classic demo of Infinity is you take 3 Fusiliers and you fight 3 Zanshees. And that's it. You just teach those 3 rules: move, shoot, dodge. And if you can do those 3, then maybe CC if it comes up, right? But CC is just shooting with 1 dice, so it's not a hugely different process.
Does that sound familiar, Dan?
Does
that sound familiar?
Is that something that Owen may have done to you?
Yeah, he's like 3-line troops, 3-line troops.
Yeah,
let's go. And he's like, so do you want to play it? I'm like, let's go to 300. Let's just go.
Let's just go 300. Let's go all the way to the beginning. Well, that's the nice thing about us demoing someone who's played a gajillion different miniature games, right? Playing with 15 models when that's half an orc squad in 40k, right? It doesn't feel like a lot. And they might all do different things, but it doesn't feel like a huge ask to get 15 models on the table, compared to like some other miniature games. And I think there's other side benefits to joining a community. And those are like the more touchy-feely ones, right? Like you have like a go-to, you have probably people of a similar experience level to you, and you can seek them out and play games and learn together. That's a big one for me. I like pairing up people who have like slightly elevated experience level with lower experienced people. And I'll get to that one in part 3 here, but you have the opportunity to meet those people and find them. And you also have the opportunity to find who like the community leaders are. Every leader, like actually not every community, but like almost every gaming group has somebody that I'll call the motivator. You can almost always pick them out in a crowd. Around here for the longest time for Infinity, it was Owen and my buddy Captain Spud. He built a ton of like Infinity resources online, and he was like bar none the best Infinity community builder I've ever met. Actually, probably the best like miniature wargaming community builder I think I've ever met in my life. He was relentless with like organizing gaming nights, making sure people had everything they need. He'd like print HVT decks, decks.
The custom modular foam sculpted Aquila Guard helmet on the plush duck that I have from him from winning a tournament is probably the best award I've gotten in a game, period.
Yeah, a prize possession.
Sorry, it's not just a duck, it's a Canadian goose, because it was the Canadian event.
I'm gonna have to listen to that.
It's a honk bird. Let's be clear. It was a honk bird, because he doesn't call them geese, he calls them honk birds.
Otherwise known as the devil.
It's so sad because he was sort of one of the last things he organized for us is he made us all patches we were going to go to Adepticon with. The Adepticon that got canceled in 2020. It was the flight of the honk birds. It was this great like mount like NCA mountie. So it was like a Neo-Terran like mountie with like a mountie hat. It was all very Canadian, very cool. But you can find those people, and those people are typically just looking to try and build their communities up. And so they are very encouraging, and they are very usually welcoming, and they're very open to answering questions and finding the people that are sort of the right experience level, the right competitive level to like play with you. So joining a community, that's the only downside I'd say with this is that they're few and far between, and they take someone like a Captain Spud, they take a motivator usually to rotate around, and they're very easy to have fall apart if that person moves on or changes games or just loses focus or gets distracted, right? You need to get a healthy community going. You should have 2 or 3 of those guys probably on the go in a given area. And my understanding is you guys have landed in a place in Calgary where there's a very healthy, active people own like 2 or 3 armies Infinity community with like a couple dozen people.
I would say like half a dozen active, but we're going to regrow it.
Yeah. It died during the pandemic.
I don't know. This is the only thing I've seen, but it's just.
You have any stories now?
There seems to be like 2 to 4 active people that want to come every Saturday, and then a bunch of other people that exist as well.
Right, or play the basement and then come out just for events and stuff like that.
That's probably the case. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like there was a lot of, I shouldn't say a lot, but there was a decent number of people at the first and only event that I've been to here.
Yeah, back in November.
And that was pretty nice. But I even knew, talking to many of them, that they were not like in the city. And
right.
There was implication, though I didn't ask directly, and I don't care. But there was clearly other people around that just haven't been out or whatever. And I imagine it's COVID rebuilding related.
Yeah. That happened a lot. It does take effort to put those things back together later. But I mean, I can remember one of my fondest, like, I have no responsibilities, but I have a job and I have money memories in my early 20s. Going to like the local 40K gaming night. This is before Infinity was even invented. So, you know, we're talking about 2001, 2000. And then everybody piling out of the game store afterwards and going to the bar, you know, and getting chicken wings and sitting around. You got 20 guys all talking about what army they're going to bring next week or what they're working on, what they're painting. And like that takes a long time to build. But people had been playing that particular miniature game in Toronto for so long that Thursday night was just 40K night, and people showed up to the game store and they played 40K, and then they all went to the bar afterwards and had chicken wings and drank beer and talked shop. And it was just this like almost club experience, but it wasn't formalized. There was just 2 or 3 guys that were always there every night. They always had nicely painted armies. They organized the games, right? Like who's going to play who, or did like sign up sheets or whatever. And then we'd have chances, if you're a new player, to like ask questions or hang out or meet people. And it happened for years. It happened for probably 15, 20 years throughout that city. So there's a power to it. And especially if you're trying to grow a community, I think that finding those people and trying to, you know, make yourself like avail yourself basically of their knowledge, it goes a long way to making you feel like you're not new, because you get to see that they have the same like learning curve stuff. If they're at a similar experience level to you, you get to see how they paint, you get to see what tables they play on, and it just kind of dispels that mystery of you know, like feeling like you don't know what you're doing when you watch other people not know what they're doing too. That's one of my things that I think, actually, if we want to dovetail us back even to Owen's first trip to Adepticon, that killed that sort of like specter of like expecting this to be bigger than it is seeing other players just be new, you know, and be slightly less experienced than you.
I think there's like a bar thing after the last event. I was busy that evening, but sure
so,
they were doing something.
I'm wisely throwing mine in a bar. So there won't be any. when you rent a Legion, you also rent a bartender, and that means that there will be a sort of like blending of those two things. This ain't my first party. So part 3, and this is actually, I think, one of the greatest segues ever, because this is a callback to the very beginning of this episode where we're talking to Dan. And he mentioned that he is already teaching a friend in Japan to play Infinity, and that's mentoring a new player. One of the like moments where you realize you're not actually a new player anymore is when you teach somebody else how to play. And this might sound crazy at first, but sometimes one of the best ways to feel like you're past that point of being sort of like not competent is to teach somebody how to play the game. The process of figuring out what the best way to do that is actually really cements what you've learned so far, because you're forced to evaluate what you know and then pass it along to somebody else. It also lets you feel like you're the one in the know, answering questions and fielding situations. It's also going to force you to go through the rules and really just sort of like, you know, put a foundation of how they work in your head, because you're being the go-to for information for someone else. So can you tell us more about that, Dan, that you know, your buddy that you're teaching and how that felt?
Yeah. I mean, he's the kind of guy who's also a very experienced wargamer. We played Malifaux together before that. And he's just in Japan for like a few months, and he'll be back in Banff. But anyways, it was more of like I'm kind of like taking the things I'm learning and then applying them. And then like afterwards, when I'm seeing him do things, I'm like, are you sure you want to do that? Oh, yeah. Afterwards, I'm like, so you probably shouldn't have done that because XYZ. And it's like,
did you want to do that?
Like, look, I understand you want your link to really go up the board fast, But when you walk 5 guys around the corner and I get to shoot at you with 5 guys instead of just peeking around the corner and having one guy with 5 dice shoot against my 1 die, it's a lot harder, especially when I have eclipse grenades and I just throw free grenades at my feet.
Right.
And so when you're not shooting at me, great.
There
Grenade.
you go. Pocket
Grenade.
sand.
And then it's
Peace.
like, perfect. And then it's like, oh, you're walking around the corner where my Raven Eye is now, and you got all heavy infantry. And then I ended very poorly for him, and he was like, that's bullcrap. I'm like, well, this could have easily been avoided. You should have won this game handedly first turn, because I didn't deploy super, super well, and you guys are so freaking fast running around that I should have just been slowly eliminated. And it was bad because I had a 7 point flashbot who survived a point blank shotgun. He was like, I get +6 and I get 3 shots. I'm hitting on 19s. I'm like, I'm hitting on 8s. And he rolled a 1, a 2, and a 20, and I rolled a 5. And so all of a sudden his shotgun was blinded from a flash pulse. And he was like, and then it's like, okay, I'm done with this. And he just wanted to go. And I'm like, no, just spend one more turn and kill the flashbot. You can do it.
I think that feeling is really important though, right? Like you knew what he should be doing. That's that moment where you realize like, oh wait, I'm playing both games in my head. Right? When you can do that mental gymnastics, I mean, you're not just playing your game, you're playing their game while you're teaching them and you're seeing what they should be doing or what would work for them. You're definitely past the point of being new. You can see the 1s and 0s, right? It's that moment in the Matrix where he's like, I don't see the 1s and 0s anymore. I just see blondes and brunettes and redheads. Like that's that like you're starting to put it together feeling, I think, in action, right? Where you're able to convey more complex topics than just how the rules work mechanically. You're able to see the sort of like flow of the game from both sides. So mentoring a new player, I think, is a great idea. And if you really want to like jumpstart a community too, to call back to the last one, that's how you start a community. Like you start recruiting players and recruit people you want to play against. Like that's why I think it's so cool that you were playing Owen, Dan, is you guys love playing games together.
Do we though?
Why not? Sorry, Owen's not capable of feeling an emotion, but if he could
so
feel an
bad
emotion,
at them, it'd be more fun. We're never gonna get plat, or we're never gonna get diamond if you have to keep playing like this. I'm just saying.
So that aside, I think that's how it happens though, right? One recruits the other, and then you slowly but surely you've got like 5, 6, 7 people playing a game that just happen to like playing games together. Why not play this one? And it helps when you are more experienced or have some sort of like concept of how the game works, because you can actually lean into what's enjoyable about the game. I think the thing that you benefit from, Dan, is having Owen there. He's able to show you that sort of like layered, here's how things that go together get to be good, that makes your brain go, oh, you know what I mean? You can sort of put those pieces together and then feel like you have those tools at your disposal while you're playing. That gives you an advantage, and then you can pass that advantage on to the next person. And now that you've stopped feeling like you need to ask a question every 5 minutes and you're answering those questions, you've got that confidence. You've built that over like the last 6 to 8 weeks.
Yeah. One last thing about teaching is that you definitely you get their new perspective of recently reading the rules, and you say things that you assume are true, and they're like, but what in the rules it says this, and you go look and you're like, oh, I was only like mostly right. I should tweak this, and then that's actually right.
Yeah,
and
my
so
understanding of this is incomplete.
So you both actually learn the rules faster when you're you have that new person reading the rules over again, and then have that perspective going in. Because I've even known I've corrected rules that you and Owen thought were one way, and then I'm like, but
ever happened.
It did happen, Dan. You're right. Don't listen.
I can't give you an example. Don't worry.
Sometimes I feel like Owen and I are that one like Decepticon in the Transformers movie whose face spins around, and sometimes we're nice and sometimes we're evil. We just say the opposite thing all the time, and Dan doesn't know what to do. I think you're absolutely on the money there, Dan. That whole like, it keeps you honest, right? It like sharpens your understanding and keeps you honest and allows you to really kind of groove in your understanding of like how things work. And you definitely called me and Owen at a couple of things where we're like, that looks like this, but it's just like it's our N3 understanding, or it's some like sort of dated understanding of the rules that isn't current.
you guys also play like 50 different miniature games, so there's also a lot of stuff to keep up in the head.
Yeah, no, we've got the Doctor Who problem. We just have too many memories, and they're you have to delete grade 4 now to learn a new miniature game.
So I have a cool experience of during the pandemic. Me and a buddy who doesn't really play miniature games very much. Well, he started to, but we were playing Shadespire, or as we called it, Shadespire. And
Shadespire must be Italian.
No, not at all. But anyways, we just started playing it, and it was fun, and it was just 1v1, and I was like, well, I'm not playing the other good games, quote unquote, but at least I'm playing a miniature game, kind of, and so it was fun. But then I realized that, like, as our understanding progressed of the game, just the 1v1 interaction of, like, us both learning the game and figuring out what cards we want to bring in our decks, and, like, buying the expansions, and we kind of had our favored war bands, but would adjust to try to beat each other's war bands, and we had our own little meta going, and it was really fun, actually. But then it was kind of like, oh, let's go to a tournament and try to win some swag and just see what other people are doing. And it was just kind of like, and then the game became like Magic the Gathering, where you had to buy too much. And I know they've kind of fixed it recently, but we stopped playing. But it was just kind of like, even if it's just you and a friend in a garage, you can start playing and you can learn a whole lot. It's harder with a full-on miniature game because there's a whole lot more models to build. But like, you can start with a tiny group. Like these guys in Banff that I have become friends with, that I played Malifaux with, and now I'm bringing them over to Infinity. And you know, they just had their own little meta through COVID, and they went to LVO and they won the Malifaux event.
That's amazing.
And it was just because they just played their own kind of 5 or 6 guys or whatever it was, just played like every day kind of thing. Because
lots of games.
All the bars were closed.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of it. You don't necessarily need to be part of community. Like a community you don't have to have that like label on it. Owen
just played me for like a year and a half before he went to that Adepticon, and it was like literally just the two of us, and he was craving playing somebody else. He's like, give me anybody but you. Like, I know you play like 7 different armies, but you play them all the same way, and I hate you, and I want to play somebody different.
Well, it became like, I know how our games are going to play out.
Yeah.
I'm going to play these 3 or 4 factions, and you play those 3 or 4 factions, and we both collect the certain types of miniatures that we like, and we build the lists in a way that we like, and we'll go into them with this kind of expectation and understanding, and we know all the tricks that each other are going to play. Like,
sure,
this is the link with this ability, and that's the drop trooper, and this is the parachutist, and this is the like this camo is pretending to be that camo, and all that kind of stuff. And then you go somewhere where someone doesn't know what models you own, and it is a very different experience. Like,
just the open and closed information. Like, you and I never bothered to hide that from each other because we know exactly what our miniature collections are. You know what I mean? Like, there was never like I better not let you know that this is like, I know that you have Aljabel, and I know that you have, I know you have Assassin. Like, I know what's going to be sitting outside my deployment zone in 5 minutes.
Oh, I tricked Owen real good in our last game.
Yep, I thought it was a mine. It was not a mine. I could have just asked what the TO
got him.
He's like, I'm just gonna come in on this side of the board, parachutist, and I'm like, I'm gonna shoot you because it's a free shot with a plasma rifle. And he's like, oh, so you just left a dude out in the open, did you? I'm like, yep. But even min-6, it should have been, I guess, open information.
Well, I didn't ask.
Yeah,
that's funny.
That's it. If I had just sat there and gone, what's the min on that mine? That one, because that'll scalpel out who's a model and who's a mine
for sure. Yeah.
To some degree. There are some that can hide that.
Yep.
But yeah,
that's funny.
I was proud. I was very proud.
And that's an example too of where I look at that game and go, like, regardless of the fact that the dice didn't kill that was just a blunder. That was a
this
could have been played around. This could have been dealt with. I lost a 20-point model for nothing.
Yeah, and you're 100% accountable for it too, because you just didn't ask.
Yep, and you could have asked, you could have known, and then it even messed up later on when I should have waited. Like, he declared an ARO and he said, "Oh, this mine's going to go off," and I went, "Oh, okay," and I'm like, "Oh, how do I want to do with it?" And he's like, "Oh, it's an EM mine," and I'm like, "Oh." Then I wouldn't have
there's
dodged.
9 different kinds of mines.
I would have just shot you, but he didn't say that. He just said it's a mine, and I didn't think to be like,
he doesn't have to tell you until it happens.
Well, no, it was happening. It was happening right then and there. And I just he said mine, and I didn't click that like I should really dig
There's
down because
more than one kind of mine. Yeah.
He has a lot of the EM stuff, and if it was like take EM mine and shoot my shotgun and kill a guy, or take shock mine and die, I was like, I'll risk the death and get my job done. But EM mine, I would have just been like bombs away. But anyway, little things like that.
Absolutely, yeah. Sweet. Well, there it is. Those are my 3. How can you be done with being a beginner? Things you can do, or things you can like sense check, or just sort of sit back and go, where am I at? How do I feel? Am I part of a community? Am I teaching somebody else how to play? Like, take those milestones and take those victories, because if you make it that far to the point where you're teaching someone else to play Infinity, or you're actively like going to a game night every week, or you just aren't getting frustrated anymore, that's a win. And you're over that. You literally are over that hardest part, I think, of getting into the game. And that was the whole point of us making these. Yeah. But you might also, of course, you're always still going to, but you're not spending more time frustrated than you are enjoying the game, I guess is a better way of putting it. Because everyone's going to get frustrated. There's always going to be, you're always going to experience tilt. The most, I guess, experienced or seasoned players of Infinity will still occasionally rage out and try and put 700 into a whip check to push a button and just have it not happen.
And some people will just always tilt.
And some people will just always tilt, yeah. But I think, honestly, if you can go back and look at that and see it as a victory, then you've made it over the hardest part of Infinity, which is just that feeling helpless and not feeling like you have the tools at your disposal. And that was the goal behind these first 6 episodes, is to just talk about and examine how you can feel like you have a grip on the game, and get you to a point where you are competent enough that you are enjoying the result of your game. And that's really it. If you feel like you've enjoyed and you've owned the result of the game, then you're in a good spot, I think. So you can let us know what you thought about this episode on our Discord, our Patreon, our Facebook, or on Spotify. And there'll be links in the podcast description. Before we sign off today, I want to talk a little bit about the future, because as we round out these 6 episodes, I think it's time to talk a little bit about what comes next. And what I've been really looking forward to, and I'm excited about, is doing some faction overviews. And I have a plan for the format for that, which I guess I can kind of spoil to you guys, where I think we start with the Sectorials. This isn't something I would have said 5 years ago that we should do. I would have said we should start with the hyperpower factions and move into the Sectorials. But if we start with the hyperpower factions, we're talking about every unit in a faction all at once. And so I thought would be useful for our next 3 episodes is if we just each take a sectorial from a different hyperpower and break them down, and use call back to some of our previous episodes and talk a bit about the killing pieces. We can even get into some new classifications, maybe some more like deep classifications like peace trading. And we can even do like a setup episode, maybe where we talk about that stuff. Things like peace traders, different kinds of midfielders, hunter pieces, and defensive and offensive gunfighters. So
have you ever experienced peace trading?
No, never. I've never seen Tigers run up or any other 5 to 10 point model run up with chain rifles or chain blasts.
and trade up.
It's never happened to me.
You've never had to.
Dog soldiers aren't a real thing. They don't they don't exist.
Remember the dogs only get into heaven if they trade up. That's all the dogs go to heaven if they manage to trade up their point value.
My favorite moment was I started trade piecing back, and he's like, "Ah!" And he looked up, and there was a small glint of pride in Owen's eye. And you'll never see it again, but it was there for just that small moment of like, "Oh, he's learning."
Oh, he got it. Oh, he just killed a 40
He
point
figured
guy
out that sometimes dying is the mission.
That's it. Sometimes, as Owen says, the brief dynamic lives of his men are spent killing something worth 8 to 10 times their point value.
Yeah.
And if they've done so, then they've been
Grunt Heavy Flamethrower has a short explosive life.
Dude, that's the goodest boy. The goodest boy is the one that takes a 40 point guy with him. Yeah, the goodest boy kills an.
Oh no, I'm talking 11 points of I infiltrate on an 8.
No, I'm aware of infiltrate on an 8. Kill Hector. That's still a game. Yeah, kill Hector. Kill Achilles. I hate all your grunts more than anyone else. So why don't you folks? I think we should start with our chosen sort of like current faction. So obviously, you could do Starmada, Dan, to start off with, because it's just a shorter list. And for the first 2 episodes, as we kind of get like I think our brains wrapped around how we're going to do this, it's probably worthwhile not having a huge list of models to go through, right? I'll do OSSS, which gives us some Aleph and some O12. And Owen, I'll let you wildcard it, man. You've been working on N2A, which might not be the most useful one, but it might be a good first
I'll probably
one.
do Assassins.
Assassins? Okay,
Yeah.
that's good. And that'll leave a few
Seeing as they're the best.
I'll just go with the best. So we're doing it that way then. If we're doing Aleph, we're doing O12, and we're doing Hack, I'll let the patrons maybe pick the 3 we do after that, because that's going to leave Combined Army, that's going to leave Ariadne, Yuching, and Pano, and you guys can maybe we'll throw a poll up when this episode, or maybe after the first 3 episodes go live, and we'll take some votes on which of the other ones we should do, because obviously I'm also playing Nomads. I have armies from all these factions, but I can speak pretty confidently about all of them, and so can Owen. And that's the plan coming up, is we'll do some faction breakdowns, and I think it'll be useful to kind of carry forward what we've done in the first 6 episodes. And so they're not going to be super veteran-y, jargony, unapproachable. It'll be more like, if we break the faction into pieces, who is good at doing what, give a list of who are good gunfighters in the faction, and kind of just like who are the good support pieces and why, go over their stat lines a little bit, and classify them a little bit. That might be useful learning for people going forward. And it won't be evergreen forever, like hopefully these episodes will be for the life of N4, but it should be useful for beginners to look at a faction and go, oh, this is what these pieces, this is the tools at the disposal of this particular sectorial, and this is who can use what. And we can even do a little bit of talk about fire teams and stuff too.
Yeah,
because
I mean, for beginner players, you should start with a sectorial.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, there's model demand is much lower,
and it limits your options a bit, so you don't have like that analysis paralysis, right, where you're overthinking the bajillion options that are in the hyperpowers. Like, there's just so much now, and this wasn't really a problem 10-15 years ago, but like, there's so many profiles in some of these armies now. It's crazy.
Do you think they'll ever change that?
They have a little bit. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. The Combined Army has a shocking number of profiles, and it's just going up. Same with Pano. Pano has so, like, the more sectorials you have, the more the hyperpower faction goes up, right?
Yeah, the big 4 of Pano, Yuching. I guess Nomads is right up there too, but I was going to say Hawk, Islam, Nomads, and Combine. But I guess it's like all of them anyway now. And Ariadne, sure, why not? Throw them in there. Give them 2 new sectorials and see 3 new sectorials. All of a sudden, they have a ton of stuff.
Mm-hmm. And even with the sectorials that are kind of not active, there's still tons of stuff in there. Ariadne has 5 sectorials, and like, that's without even because usually the sectorials get access to all the mercenaries, so that's even not counting all the mercenaries. Like, there's a few mercenaries available to the hyperpower factions, but not all of them. This is a shocking amount of stuff, and being able to mix and match like dogs with bears, with Straylocks, with Caledonians, with whatever. There is a reason why a lot of the tier 1 sort of like conceptually the tier 1 lists are the hyperpower lists, because they just get access to so much stuff that can mix and match, right? You can mix and match so many profiles from all the sectorials. You just get so many options, and when you're not worrying about link teams so much, although you can still take duos, it feels like a good one to end on, because we'll have already talked about all of those individual pieces beforehand, going through all the sectorials.
Now you get a Sunktic Butt, an assassin, and a tag.
Right? They get Maggie, the Sunktic Butt, and the tag. You could why just pick one? Why not have all of them? Yeah. Although Baram can do the disgusting. I made a pretty shameless.
I argue that guy has no purpose in that faction. I was talking in the Discord. The new what's the
the
new,
Shikush, the Shikush.
Yeah, the Shikush. I don't know. I asked in the Discord if anyone can justify his existence in his faction, and the Asawira kind of prices him out, unfortunately. The Bukhtar is just him better.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, and the Bukhtar
like
too.
It's hard. It's real hard. Like, the Asawira doesn't have tack aware, so it's like, all right, he's different, right? But the Bukhtar is half points. Him.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. Anyway, that's when I talk about that faction.
And that's
I'm excited to learn.
Like, right? Yeah, I know. I think it should be good, because you'll be able to hear what other stuff does too.
Mm-hmm. And you always hear about like your own faction, right? And so you guys are talking, and you guys reference so many things, and I like go to play, and then like some local listeners are like, "Oh yeah, that was what you guys talked about in that episode. I was like, if you say so. There's a whole lot of names being thrown out here that I recognize very little.
Half of them until they shoot some of your guys.
Right.
It's not as easy to recognize.
Do you remember what the Sunduck Bud is now, Dan?
Oh, I remember what the Sunduck Bud is.
Sunduck Bud is not easy to forget. I talked up the Sunduck Bud to Jordan actually for the tournament. He's probably gonna take a 15 order vanilla list, I think, for hack. That's pretty mean. Yeah, it's gonna have it's more of like a mixed bag than your double Maggie list, but it does have like the Rafik Maggie.
The double Maggie is actually is not vanilla. It's a
it's a Rama. Yeah,
oh,
it's Rama Task Force. Yeah, I know, because they're only AVA 1 in vanilla. But the core of it is like that same sort of thing where you've got that big hitting piece, bunch of support pieces, and then like group 2 is like Gazi, Delami. You know what I mean? All that like midfield sort of like jamming stuff. So there's plenty of disruption and plenty of like dependable hitting pieces and hackers and stuff too. So I think he's gonna do well. I hope so, because he's been practicing for 2 months now for it, and he keeps going back and forth. He played Akon last weekend, and now he's back to Hackaslam. So it'll be fun. I think it'll be fun to do the next season and start digging through and looking at the various like units and stuff like that and having that conversation.
Sweet.
Sweet. All right. Well, thanks everybody who joined us. Thanks Owen and Dan for hanging out and talking Infinity again tonight. We will be back next week, starting to dive into factions. And I think maybe we'll do like a I'll lead that one again with OSSS, and we'll do a preamble talking about a few concepts we can layer in for that next part of the season too. So thanks for listening, everybody, and good night.
Goodbye.
Bye.